There is a point in adolescence where the world stops feeling safe and starts feeling cinematic. Everything is louder, brighter, more urgent. The youth don't see celebrities as people. They see them as escape routes. Icons become anchors in a world that feels too big and too indifferent. And when a face on a poster or a voice on the radio starts to feel more real than the people in your own home, admiration starts to border obsession. You want to be near them, to be chosen. And when the fantasy is all you have, you follow it anywhere, even if it leads you into the dark.
Welcome to Down the Crooked Path. I'm your host, Amanda Joy. Join me as we dive into eerie and spine-chilling stories that blur the lines between reality and the unknown. From cryptids and mysterious disappearances to true crime, UFO sightings, and paranormal activity. Venture into the unknown and uncover the secrets that lie down the crooked path.
Obsession. It festers behind the closed doors of bedrooms, lit by transistor glow and phone screens. It's here that feels safe, but that's the trick. The danger isn't the celebrity, it's the way no one questions the devotion, the way adults shrug it off as harmless, the way it's allowed to metastasize in bedrooms, basements, and bus ride homes. Sometimes fandom will lead you to stay out past curfew, take a different bus route home, or go beyond the edges of common sense, until the lights home are too far behind to find again. In 1956, America was shifting underfoot. Television sets flickered in living rooms like altars. The post-war optimism hadn't vanished, but it had started to curdle slightly, and something new was taking its place. There was a hunger for excitement, for identity. The youth, especially young girls, were caught in the middle of it. They were old enough to feel the pressures of conformity expected from their elders, but young enough to believe that something better was out there, something brighter, something that moved like music and sounded like rebellion. Elvis Presley was almost an invasion. He grew up in Tupelo, Mississippi, and later Memphis, places that were known to have a coexistence of black gospel choirs, Delta blues, and white country music. As a child, he attended black churches like Reverend W. Hubert Brewster's East Triggs Avenue Baptist Church. He listened to black artists on Bugle Street and idolized performers like B.B. King and Arthur Big Boy Kudrup, whose songs he would later record. Elvis was a controversial person from the word jump. He blended African-American blues, Southern gospel, and country music to create a new sound, rockabilly, and it exploded into mainstream popularity. At the time, American music charts were racially segregated, race records for black artists, pop for white, and Elvis kind of shattered that system. Between 1956 and 1958, he had 22 songs in the top 15 Billboard's R&B charts, which was designed for black audiences. His version of Hound Dogs, originally recorded by Big Mama Thornton, became a crossover phenomenon, topping the R&B country and pop charts simultaneously. Technically, he stole black music styles and delivered them to white audiences. And there was a clash of opinions of this on the time. Jackie Wilson noted that many black performers even adapted his stage mannerisms, flipping the narrative of appropriation on its head. Elvis himself was candid about his influence, telling Jet magazine in 1957, quote, "Rock and roll was here a long time before I came along. Nobody can sing that kind of music like black people. Let's face it, I can't sing like that Dominoes can." In 1956, his appearance on The Milton Berle Show marked a turning point. He performed Hound Dog without his guitar, allowing full focus on his body language. Hips gyrating, knees bending, he sent shockwaves through American households, and the backlash was immediate. Critics called it vulgar, parents were outraged, and religious leaders cried warnings of moral decay. From then, he was on every television set. hips thrusting, voice like velvet. He was on the radio, on lunchboxes, in the dreams of girls who had never left their neighborhoods. Adults saw him as too loud, too sexual, and too unpredictable, but for teenagers, especially girls, he was electrifying. He made emotions feel cinematic, made rebellion feel romantic. He was embodying the music, not just by singing. The obsession with Elvis came with radio contests and fan clubs, rumors that he might be filming nearby. Televisions amplified the tension. Unlike radio, which left performances to the imagination, TV made Elvis's sexuality visible and deeply polarizing. His appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show drew over 54 million viewers. That was more than a third of the U.S. population at the time. Sullivan was initially reluctant to host him, but eventually agreed. But he insisted on filming Elvis from the waist up to avoid broadcasting his pelvic movements. But this censorship only heightened the allure. It seemed like the more the adults tried to suppress him, the more the teenagers leaned in. Not only was Elvis's sex appeal a topic of clamor, but in the context of 1950s America, so was his sexuality. He blurred the lines between masculine aggression and feminine allure, creating a persona that was both threatening and seductive. He challenged gender norms with eyeliner and tight pants, his curled lip. For young girls, he represented a break from the sanitized romantic ideals of the era, and in that sense, the adults viewed him as a danger. The media's response to Elvis was a mix of fascination and fear. Newspaper ran headlines warning of Elvis the pelvis, while psychologists debated his impact on adolescent development. The press framed him as a symbol of delinquency and a corrupting force that could unravel the moral fabric of youth. He was definitely the definition of generational divide. The cultural storm that followed Presley's rise didn't just reshape media and music, but it rewired the emotional circuitry of the adolescents. For many girls, especially those who grew up in quiet neighborhoods with strict parents and routines, he was almost godlike. And this is where our story takes a turn. A choice made in the dark with coats zipped and hearts pounding. Sometimes the fantasy feels more real than the life you've been handed, and you don't ask what's waiting for you out there. Sometimes you just go, and sometimes you don't come back. The Chicago winter in 1956 was sharp. The air laced with the smell of coal smoke and car exhaust. Snow clung to the curbs in gray ridges, and the EL trains rattled overhead like clockwork, ferrying workers between the city's industrial heart and the suburban new sprawls that were rapidly swallowing the farmland. This was the era of Park Forest and Levittown-style optimism, when families fled to the city for cul-de-sacs and carports, chasing the promise of safety, space, and sameness. The suburbs were marketed as sanctuaries, places where children could ride bikes without fear, and where mothers could host Tupperware parties in pastel kitchens, and fathers could return each night to trimmed lawns and television dinners. Inside the city, Chicago pulsed with post-war energy. The economy was strong, the skyline was rising, and the cultural scene was alive with jazz, blues, and the first tremors of rock and roll. Department stores downtown glittered with holiday displays, and movie theaters on State Street flickered with Technicolor dreams. But the city was also beginning to fracture. Urban renewal projects were displacing entire communities. Racial tensions simmered beneath the surface, and the divide between city and suburb was growing more pronounced by the day. Still, for most families, especially white working middle-class households, there was a sense that the world was finally beginning to settle into place. The war was over, the Depression was a memory, and yet, for all of its order and optimism, there was something brittle about the peace. Teenagers were beginning to pull away from their parents' values, drawn to the raw energy of celebrities like Elvis. Televisions brought the outside world into the living room, and with it came new ideas, new temptations, and new fears. Barbara and Patricia Grimes were raised in Brighton Park, a working-class neighborhood on the southwest side of Chicago. Their family was Catholic and close-knit, with 7 children in total. Their mother, Loretta Grimes, was a homemaker, and their father, Joseph, worked for the Union Stockyards. The household was modest and loving. The girls shared chores, attended church regularly, and were expected to follow curfews and family rules. Their mother was especially protective, and their siblings looked up to them. Barbara often helped her mother with errands and cooking, and Patricia was known for entertaining her younger siblings. Barbara Grimes, who was 15, was a sophomore at Thomas Kelly High School. She was known for being quiet, responsible, and studious. She enjoyed reading and spending time with friends and doting on her younger siblings. She was very protective of Patricia and often took the lead when they went out together. Patricia Grimes, nicknamed Petey, was 12 years old. She was a 7th grader at St. Marie's Catholic School. She was bubbly, cheerful, and adored her older sister. Patricia had a playful streak and was known for her sense of humor and warmth. The sisters were die-hard Elvis Presley fans, part of the wave of teenage girls swept up in the early days of rock and roll. They collected Elvis memorabilia. They played his records constantly at home and had even seen the movie Love Me Tender 10 times. Going to the Brighton Theater was a regular outing for the girls. It was a safe, familiar place just a few blocks away from home. They would often walk there together, buy snacks, and sit side by side in the dark, whispering about Elvis and the movie's romantic scenes. The night of December 28, 1956, was supposed to be just another trip to the movies. But the girls encountered something much darker than a movie theater. That evening, the girls planned on seeing Love Me Tender for the 11th time. The Brighton Theater was about 1.5 miles away from their home. The girls left around 7:30 p.m. with $2.50 between the two of them, which was enough for movie tickets and snacks, possibly even a second showing. They promised their mother that they would be home before 11:55 p.m. if they stayed for the second viewing. After the movie, they were supposed to meet their older sister and younger brother at a nearby bus stop and head home together. A friend, Dorothy Werner, saw the girls at the concession line after the first showing had ended, which suggested that they had, in fact, stayed for the second showing. Around 11:30, 2 teenage boys claimed to have seen Barbara and Patricia laughing and jumping in and out of doorways just blocks away from their home. Their siblings waited at the designated bus stop, but the girls never arrived. 3 buses came and went without them. Barbara and Patricia failed to return home by midnight. Their mother, Loretta, grew anxious. She began to call friends and neighbors, and by 2 a.m. she had contacted the Chicago Police Department to report her daughters missing. Investigation started immediately with over 300 officers assigned to the case, including detectives, patrolmen, and volunteers, all working round the clock in shifts. A dedicated task force was formed, and the search extended across Cook County and beyond. Over 300,000 people were questioned, with 2,000 individuals subjected to formal interrogations. The FBI was even briefly involved, though jurisdictional limitations kept the role minimal. The police went door to door in Brighton Park and surrounding neighborhoods, questioning residents and checking basements, garages, and alleyways. This level of involvement was unprecedented for non-celebrity cases involving minors, and it was reflective of both the public's emotional investment and the authorities' urgency. The search spanned nearly a month, becoming one of the most exhaustive missing persons investigations in Chicago's history. The girls' neighborhood was the initial focus. Officers searched vacant lots, alleys, and rooftops. The theater at Archer and 42nd Street, where the girls were last seen, was thoroughly investigated as well. Witnesses were interviewed and nearby businesses were checked. Since the girls were expected to take the bus home, police traced the CTA bus lines, questioned drivers, and reviewed the passenger reports. Based on reported sightings, the searches were extended into city centers, including hotels, diners, and train stations. Thousands of tips came in, and from these tips, the search was expanded into Glenview, Willow Springs, and other suburbs. These included searches of wooded areas, ravines, and roadside ditches. With Elvis was widely reported, and investigators hoped that a message from him might encourage them to come home if they had run away. Elvis responded with a detailed appeal. He said, quote, "If you are good Presley fans, you will go home and ease your mother's worries," end quote. This quote was widely circulated in newspapers and broadcast on radios. It was a rare moment of personal outrage from a celebrity to a missing fan. This plea was broadcasted on Chicago radio stations, printed in local and national newspapers. It was coordinated through the Illinois Missing Persons Awareness Network, which had reached out to Elvis's team. The message was intended to humanize the search and offer hope, especially as rumors swirled that the girls might have run away to meet Elvis or attend one of his concerts. Other tactics included flyers and posters, with thousands of them being distributed across Chicago and Illinois, featuring photos and descriptions of the girls. Door-to-door canvassing and field searches were physically grueling due to the sub-freezing conditions of the Chicago winters, with snow and ice blanketing the cities and surrounding areas. Snowbanks and frozen grounds concealed clues, including footprints and discarded items. Radio and newspaper campaigns encouraged public vigilance. Tracking dogs were deployed in wooded areas and the girls' last known locations in hopes of picking up some trail to give any indication as to what direction the girls may have gone. Police searched storm drains, canals, and the Chicago River was even searched for any signs of the girls. Schools' attendance were logged and reviewed, as were Elvis Presley fan club memberships and movie theater ticket stubs, in hopes of any sort of pattern or clues. However, none were found. Tips came in by the hundreds. Some were plausible and others were incredibly bizarre, which created chaos and an emotional charge within the investigation. Many of the tips suggested that the girls were in fact still alive. Aside from the two teenage boys claiming to have seen the girls a few blocks away from their home, was another boy who reported seeing them getting into a dark-colored Mercury sedan with two men, one in the front seat and one in the back. A bus driver had said the girls boarded a CTA bus around 11:05 p.m., but he didn't recall them getting off. Reports of sightings following that day included a witness claiming to see the girls browsing records at the Kersey's Five and Dime store, possibly listening to Elvis records. Workers at another store believed that they saw the sisters with two sailors on January 3, 1957. A woman in Minnesota swore that she had met the sisters in a Nashville bus station rest stop on January 9th, sparking rumors that they were headed to Memphis to find Elvis. Another claim came from a restaurant worker who described seeing the girls, and one of them had appeared sickly or drunk on January 17th. And then there were reports of sightings from out-of-state and national claims, which included sightings in Glenview, downtown Chicago, and even Tennessee, Indiana, and Wisconsin. Some tips suggested that the girls had run away to meet Elvis, fueled by their intense fandom, and the media focused on that angle. Newspapers and radio stations published many of these tips, sometimes without any sort of verification. Combined, these tips painted a picture of two girls on the move, from shopping to traveling and even meeting strangers. This created a belief that the girls were still alive and had led investigators to focus on the runaway theory rather than towards a homicide investigation, which would soon prove to be a mistake. The case took a traumatic turn when Loretta Grimes received multiple ransom letters claiming her daughters were alive. The first note arrived in early January, just about a week after her daughters' disappearances. The note was delivered anonymously and claimed that the girls were alive and being cared for by someone who had found them after they had run away. The writer demanded money in exchange for their safe return, although the amount and instructions were vague. This letter gave Loretta hope and triggered the FBI involvement. A second letter came January 12th and instructed Loretta to travel to Milwaukee, enter a specific Catholic church, and leave $1,000 in the collection plate. The FBI escorted her to the church, but no one appeared. Later, this particular letter would be traced back to a mental patient and confirmed as a hoax. A third letter would be received mid-January and contained vague threats, claiming that the girls would be harmed if demands weren't met. Like the others, it lacked verifiable details and was dismissed after the investigation. All of the letters were mailed anonymously, and some were postmarked from Chicago. The FBI and the Chicago police treated each letter seriously, fearing that the girls might be alive and in danger. Handwriting analysis, fingerprinting testing, and postal tracing were conducted, but no useful evidence ever emerged. Not only did the letters consume time and resources, pulling focus from local witness reports, suspect interviews, and search efforts, but they sent Loretta Grimes into an emotional roller coaster with each letter that arrived. On January 2nd, 1957, nearly a month after their disappearance, in a snow-covered roadside ditch in Willow Spring, Illinois, the bodies of the two girls were found. This area was a desolate stretch of German Church Road in a rural suburb southwest of Chicago. A construction worker named Leonard Prescott spotted what he thought were mannequins in the snow while driving past the area. But upon closer inspection, he quickly realized that they were human bodies and immediately alerted the authorities. The girls were found lying on their sides, face down, with Barbara's body slightly atop Patricia's. Their heads had been turned in opposite directions. They were both completely nude, with their clothing never being recovered. Their bodies had been partially obscured by brush and snow, with no clear signs of fatal violence, such as gunshot wounds or deep lacerations. However, Barbara did have 3 shallow wounds to her face and body, possibly from an ice pick or some similar instrument, and Patricia did show signs of blunt force trauma, including a possible blow to the face. Both had numerous abrasions and contusions, but none were conclusively fatal themselves. The location of the ditch was remote and rarely traveled, which suggested that the killer most likely knew the area well. The bodies were not buried deep, implying that either they had been discarded in haste or that there was a desire for the bodies to be discovered eventually. The site was outside of the main search radius, which explains the delay in finding them. Snowfall records indicated that the area had been clear of snow until January 9th, meaning that the bodies may have not been there before that date. This led investigators like Harry Gloss to argue that the girls were kept alive for days, even weeks prior to being killed and dumped, while others believed that the girls died quickly and were dumped here later. Since the bodies were found atop of the snow and not beneath it, this strongly implied that they were not placed there until after the date of January 9th. An autopsy was performed by Cook County pathologists led by Dr. Harry L. Spann. This would conclude that the girls had died of secondary shock and exposure, but the findings were controversial and incomplete, as well as widely disputed, even by the investigators involved in the case. The diagnosis was ambiguous, suggesting death from a combination of trauma and exposure to cold. The estimated time of death was within 5 hours of their last confirmed sighting on December 28th. This was based off of the body's condition, the content or lack thereof of food in their stomachs, and the absence of frostbite. One of several issues with this timeline estimate was that many of the tips, several of which came from sources considered to be reliable, suggested that the girls were alive for weeks after their disappearance, leading police to chase dead ends and even question the reliability of the forensic estimate. Investigators couldn't establish a clear timeline, which made it harder to identify suspects or reconstruct the girls' final movements. Furthermore, the cold weather preserved the bodies, yes, but it also masked decompositional clues that could have helped pinpoint the time of death. No definitive signs of prolonged captivity like malnutrition or restraint marks were found, but the lack of clothing and exposure made such evidence hard to detect. On Barbara's body, there were 3 shallow puncture wounds in her chest and abdomen. These were described as possibly inflicted by an ice pick or similarly shaped object. but they were not deep enough to be fatal. There were minor abrasions and contusions present on her face and legs, which were consistent with blunt contact or dragging. There were no signs of sexual assault that were officially recorded in the autopsy, though this point would later be disputed by investigators, primarily Harry Gloss, who believed that she had been sexually molested. He alleged that Cook County crime lab technicians had supported this claim, but that the coroner's office had dismissed it. She had no defensive wounds, suggesting that she may have been incapacitated or even unaware of the attack. There were no signs of poisoning, strangulation, or internal trauma that could explain her death. Patricia's body was found beneath Barbara's, lying face down with her head turned sharply to the right. Patricia had visible bruising and contusions, particularly to her face and head. These injuries were consistent with being struck by a blunt object, though not necessarily fatal. Like her sister, she had abrasions on her legs and torsos, possibly from being dragged or moved post-mortem. Both Barbara and Patricia showed no sign of struggle, and there was no sign of sexual assault on either of them. With both of the girls, the environmental issues played a big role. The cold weather preserved the bodies, which did allow for more detailed autopsies, but the freezing and thawing cycles had distorted the soft tissue, making it difficult to detect subtle injuries or signs of trauma, such as suffocation or sexual assault. Frostbite and ice damage may have mimicked or masked abrasions and bruises, complicating the trauma analysis. When the girls were found, there was a thin layer of ice that had formed on their skin. This suggested that they were still warm when placed in the ditch, meaning that they had likely died shortly before being dumped. This detail contradicted the official autopsy, which claimed that they had died December 28th, the night that they had vanished. The girls had also been found nude, and their clothing was never recovered. Any fibers, hair, or DNA that might have been on their clothing was lost. Exposure to the elements likely washed away or degraded any trace evidence, such as skin cells or body fluid. The absence of insects, also due to the cold, eliminated a key forensic tool when it comes to estimating the time of death. Despite the inconclusive autopsy and the chilling haziness that surrounded their final hours, the investigation soon shifted focus from the girls' cause of death to the question of who might have wanted to harm them. As public pressure mounted and theories multiplied, a cast of potential suspects began to emerge, each shadowed by inconsistencies, rumors, and proximity to the girls' last known movement. Amongst these names was Benny Bedwell, a 20-year-old drifter from Tennessee who would become the most publicly scrutinized suspect in the Grime sisters' case. Benny would sometimes work as a dishwasher at the D&L restaurant in Chicago, and notably had a resemblance to Elvis Presley, which made him memorable to witnesses and possibly the Grime sisters, who were devoted Elvis fans. On the night of December 30th, the owner of the D&L restaurant claimed that Bedwell was seen with two girls, matching Barbara and Patricia's description. Then, on January 24th, Bedwell was arrested and questioned by Cook County authorities. He signed a 14-page confession claiming he and a man named Frank had spent several days with the girls, feeding them hot dogs and alcohol before killing them and dumping their bodies in a culvert. However, his story conflicted the coroner's report that the girls had died within 5 hours of their last confirmed sighting on the 28th. There was also no forensic evidence linking Bedwell to the crime scene or the bodies. Bedwell's story also changed multiple times, and he later withdrew his confession, stating that it had been coerced by the sheriff's deputies. Given the era and interrogation practices of the time, this claim was taken seriously by some investigators. There were also some reports that his named accomplice was actually Edward Benny Wellington, which has led to some confusion over whether Frank and Edward were the same person or Frank was a fabricated alias. Police did later identify a man named Edward Benny Wellington, who was a 28-year-old drifter, as the person who Bedwell may have been referencing. Wellington was questioned but never charged. He denied any involvement and was released due to a lack of evidence. Sheriff Joseph Loban believed that Bedwell might have been guilty and pursued the confession, while Harry Gloss was skeptical. He thought Bedwell may have had peripheral involvement but highly doubted that he was the actual killer. The confession was widely reported, and Bedwell was briefly vilified in the press. His Elvis-like appearance added a surreal layer to the media narrative. But ultimately, due to a lack of evidence and the autopsy's contradiction of the timeline, Bedwell was released without charges. But his confession remains one of the most controversial elements of this case. Another key suspect in the Grime sisters case was Max Flegg, a 17-year-old from Chicago. Flegg was a local youth with a troubled history, known to police for petty crimes and behavioral issues. He just so happened to live in the same general area as the Grimes family. Flegg was brought in for questioning after investigators noticed inconsistencies in his statement and behavior. During a polygraph test, he allegedly confessed to the murders of Barbara and Patricia Grimes. However, because Flegg was underage and didn't have legal counsel present, the confession was deemed inadmissible in court. He later recanted, and no physical evidence ever linked him to the crime. There are several detectives who believe that Flegg's confession was credible, citing his knowledge of details that had never been released to the public. To some investigators, this made him the most likely perpetrator. Others argue that he was coerced or confused, and that the confession lacked corroboration. His involvement in the case has been one of the most underreported threads. Walter Kranz was a self-proclaimed psychic and former mental patient who became a suspect in the Grime sisters case after making an eerily accurate prediction about the location of their bodies. On January 15th, Kranz called the Englewood police station and claimed he had had a vision while intoxicated. He stated that Barbara and Patricia Grimes were dead and that their bodies could be found in a remote area near Willow Springs. This tip was shockingly accurate. The girls' bodies were discovered exactly 1 week later, on January 22nd, in a roadside ditch in Willow Springs. Kranz was held for observation and questioned extensively. He underwent lie detector tests, which yielded inconclusive results. Handwriting experts believed Kranz may have authored one of the extortion letters sent to Loretta Grimes, demanding $5,000 to release the girls. Despite these suspicions, no physical evidence ever linked him to the crime, and Kranz's tip, while accurate, was not enough to establish guilt. His mental health history and intoxicated state at the time of the call was made about his vision was difficult to interpret legally. The extortion letter connection was never proven, and the FBI could not build a case against him. Another suspect was an unnamed, middle-aged man. On the night of their disappearance, multiple witnesses claimed to have seen the Grimes sisters near a Brighton theater, possibly entering a car driven by a middle-aged man. The man was described as white, middle-aged, driving a dark-colored sedan or Mercury, and possibly wearing a hat and overcoat, which was typical of the era. Some witnesses believe that the girls had entered the car willingly, suggesting that they may have known the driver or, at the very least, felt safe enough to accept a ride. Based on witness descriptions, composite sketches were created and distributed to local precincts and media outlets. The police conducted door-to-door canvassing in the Brighton Park area and McKinley Park neighborhoods, but no one matching the description was ever positively identified, and the car was never located either. The problem with this theory was that there were conflicting accounts that muddied the timeline. Some witnesses claimed to see the girls walking home alone, while others said there was a man. And the media frenzy surrounding the case led to hundreds of tips, many of which contradicted each other, making it difficult to discern which ones were valid. Eventually, the focus of the investigation shifted to suspects like Benny Bedwell and Walter Kranz, which sidelined the unidentified man theory. The case of the Grimes sisters lost momentum due to an accumulation of several factors. The case dominated headlines for weeks, but as leads dried up and suspects were released, public interest waned. Investigators faced pressure to pursue results, leading in rushed interrogations and premature conclusions. Eventually, despite intense public interest and early leads, no suspect was ever charged, and the investigation was gradually shelved, becoming one of Chicago's most infamous cold cases. In more recent years, several former Chicago area detectives have revisited the case independently, reviewing old files, re-interviewing witnesses, and exploring leads that were dismissed or overlooked in the 1950s. Their efforts have kept the case in public consciousness, though they lack the authority to reopen the case formally. Aside from that, this case has been featured in numerous podcasts, documentaries, and articles, and most recently in People's magazines and on platforms like A&E and Unsolved Mysteries subreddits. These explorations often highlight the inconsistencies in the original investigation and speculate on modern forensic possibilities. Some researchers have called for the release of sealed case files or for DNA testing on any preserved evidence. However, because the girls' bodies were found nude and exposed to the elements, and because forensic preservation standards in 1957 were minimal, it's uncertain whether any usable DNA remains. Conflicting interpretations of the autopsy, especially regarding the time of death and signs of assault, still remains a focal point for modern reevaluation. Sadly, sometimes the very efforts that are meant to bring clarity only deepen the chaos, and the Grimes sisters case is a haunting example of this. The Chicago press devoured the Grimes sisters case and regurgitated every whisper, every shadow, every maybe sighting, and twisted it into front-page gospel. They became ghost stories in real time, with their faces plastered on milk cartons and storefronts like saints of suburban dread. And although well-intended, when Elvis made his public urge begging the girls to come home, he added a layer of celebrity mythos that created blurred lines between fact and spectacle. The city held its breath and the cops buckled under the weight of it. Every tip became a lead, every confession a headline, even when the facts didn't fit. There were too many eyes, too many mouths, and too many hands reaching from the dark, and sadly, this probably caused the truth to drown. The Chicago Police, the Cook County Sheriff's Office, and the FBI all had overlapping roles in this case. Coordination was inconsistent, and leads were sometimes lost in bureaucratic handoff. As weeks passed with no resolution, public interest waned. The case that once held the nation's obsession quietly faded from headline. Overall, the case collapsed under the weight of too much noise. Every element that was meant to help became a hindrance. The media had turned tragedy into a spectacle, flooding the public with half-truths and sensational leads. The avalanche of tips, some sincere and others attention-seeking, sent investigators chasing ghosts across state lines. And the pressure to produce results led to rushed arrest and coerced confessions that only muddied the timeline. Even the weather conspired against clarity, preserving the bodies while obscuring evidence. In the end, the case became a maze of contradictions where truth was buried beneath the very efforts meant to uncover it. Loretta Grimes died on October 22, 2024, still haunted by the mystery that stole her daughters. She had spent nearly 7 decades searching for answers that never came. From the moment Barbara and Patricia went missing, Loretta became the face of a mother's anguish. She endured false confessions, media storms, and investigative dead ends, each one reopening wounds that never truly healed. She passed away at 87 years old, and the case was still unsolved, the weight of that absence loitering every day. Loretta died without knowing justice and without knowing the piece of what really happened to her girls. That evening, the Grime sisters didn't just vanish into the cold. Rather, they were swallowed by a city's panic, a nation's obsession, and a mystery that has refused to thaw. What began as a simple night at the movies unraveled into one of Chicago's most disturbing tragedies, tangled in a media frenzy, filled with false hope and investigative missteps. Loretta Grimes carried the weight of that night until her final breath, never knowing who took her daughters or why. And though decades have passed, the silence around Barbara and Patricia's case still hums. In the end, it isn't just a story about two missing girls. It's about how a community can lose its way chasing shadows, and how sometimes the loudest stories are the ones that never end up finding their ending. Thank you for walking this cold and winding path with me. Let the flicker of old posters and forgotten playlists guide your way, and may the mysteries we chase never be louder than the truths we miss. Until next time, I'm Amanda Joy.
Have you ever seen a shadow linger in the corner of your eye, seen a flashing light dart across the sky? Have you ever wished upon a candle to make your wish come true? I'm sure you've told a haunted tale or two. Are you interested in learning the pagan ways, witchcraft, grimoires, candles await? Have you ever seen the living dead and stood still instead of fled? Cryptics are fun, but the universe has our eye. The stars align, shows us our signs, and we're here to discuss the divine. Welcome to Moon Brews, a supernatural podcast, hosted by yours truly, Haley.
Follow the path even further. If this episode left you lingering in the shadows, there is always more to explore. Follow @Down the Crooked Path on TikTok and Instagram for haunting visuals, behind-the-scenes lore, and updates for upcoming episodes. Every post is another breadcrumb deeper into the strange, the forgotten, and the beautifully unsettling. Stay curious and keep wandering.